Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We'll give folks a moment to come in if there's more folks that want to attend. Oops, sorry. So my name is Kendall Flint, and I'm the task manager for outreach for the Kings County Association of Governments Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy Update. I'm going to ask Executive Director Terry King to say a few words to kick us off tonight. Terry?
Thank you, Kendall. I want to welcome everyone to the virtual workshop for the Kings Regional Vision. We appreciate your time and thank you for joining us. As Kendall said, my name is Terry King, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kings County Association of Governments. And our agency is responsible for preparing the Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP for short, which is a long-range transportation planning document that we update every 4 years. The RTP includes a policy element that identifies the policies to meet the transportation needs of the Kings County region. It also includes an action element that identifies the transportation projects and programs that would be implemented. And it includes a financial element that identifies the anticipated revenues from all sources to fund the transportation projects identified in the action element. Also, the Sustainable Community Strategy is an additional element of the Regional Transportation Plan that identifies the various plans, programs, and projects that, if implemented, could allow the Kings County region to meet its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets established by the California Air Resources Board. So at this time, I'll let Kendall take the slideshow away. And again, thank you everyone for attendance.
Thank you, Terry. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues that are on with us tonight. You'll see Lopez Navarra and Jim Damkowicz. He'll say, if you wouldn't mind letting folks know that the kingsregionalvision.com website is live and does allow for folks that might be Spanish speakers to participate there and also weigh in Spanish.
Of course. Thank you, Kendall, for the introduction. Bienvenidos a todos. Mi nombre es Ilse López Narváez. Trabajo con DKS Associates. En nuestro proyecto se puede ver en el sitio kingsregionalvision.com. En ese sitio web puede ver el plan que se está desarrollando para el condado de Kings y también puede participar virtualmente en ese sitio. Si gusta escuchar esta presentación en español, por favor use nuestro botón de interpretación en el Zoom. Que está el botón abajo en el icon que está aquí abajo. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Ilse. If you would also explain that the presentation we're going to give tonight, as well as the exhibits that will be shown as part of the presentation, will also be made available in Spanish online following this virtual presentation.
So, la presentación y todos los documentos que se van a presentar esta noche van a estar disponibles también en el sitio web de kingsregionalvision.com. El sitio está disponible en español y inglés y los documentos también van a estar en inglés y en español. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Ilse. Also with me tonight is Jim Damkowicz. He's the project manager for DKS Associates, and I may be asking Jim at various points during our presentation night to weigh in, but let me get started here. First of all, KCAG, the Kings County Association of Governments, is basically a metropolitan planning organization. And what that means is that the federal government actually designates places where they need to have, I'm going to say, a regional group of folks that were able to distribute funds for, distribution through local agencies. And Eduardo, I apologize. I see you have a Q&A question about Spanish language. We can, if you'd like to move over to Spanish language, Eduardo, do you need Spanish language translation this evening? Or are you good with English this evening? We can go either way. Okay. Normally what we can do on these, just, we normally keep a separate channel open, but given the evening tonight, I think we're going to be okay. But again, we will make this all available in Spanish as well. So as I said, the Kings County Association of Governments actually has 4 members of the cities as well as the county, and they're all members. So the idea here is to try to create a playing field where all these different agencies could gather together and share information about what they're going to be doing in terms of investment in transportation over the next 25 years. An MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, again, is a requirement from the federal government. KCAG is one of 18 in California, 381 nationwide. And again, they're really set up to distribute funding to local agencies. So the transportation update, the RTP, and the Sustainable Community Strategy are done every 4 years. They guide basically regional transportation investments, priorities, and plans. The idea is we have worked with all the local communities, the cities, and the county to determine where they're going to put investments in the next 4 years. And the idea here is to wrap that all into one package so we can see cumulatively what the impact of those investments might be for the region as things move forward. Now, this process really looks at regional issues and multimodal, meaning we're not just looking at roads, but we're looking at places where people might walk or bike, or transit might go. And these things also, through the Sustainable Community Strategy, link with housing. And that's unique to California in terms of metropolitan planning organizations, in that California passed SB 32, which basically says you need to link these investments so that where transportation dollars go, they make it easier for people to get places based on housing. So these are all connected with general plans for the local communities to determine how these are going to work collaboratively or holistically as time marches on. This covers the next 25 years through 2046. Now, the plan, of course, shared vision from all these different communities as well as the county, has to be fiscally sound, financially sound, what we can actually do with the money we have and the money we expect to have. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but every city and the county has an allocation for what they're going to get from either their general fund, which is generated by everything from property tax to sales tax, as well as SB1, which is funds that come from the state. Kings County is not what we call a self-help county. So there isn't funding coming from a tax measure that's specific for transportation, but there are funds that come in from grants and from other sources. So we look at all those sources and determine with the money they have, what are you going to do with it during that time? Now, this really emphasizes as well system preservation, which means you're not going to see a lot of things that plan that are new roads or new connections. It's really about maintaining the ones that already exist in the county and ensuring that they are safe to travel on and they're operating at maximum capacity and making sure that people can move freely and safely to different destinations. This also has to meet federal and state requirements. In California, that means compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and also with federal requirements for how funds are spent. Now, the scenario development really involved looking at 4 different, that just seems like I skipped a slide too many, but I'm going to think that's okay. Let me just double check. Nope, I guess it's right. So the scenarios we have tonight to discuss, there are basically 4 of them. And the first one looks at basically the current land use. And when I say scenario, this is what we're looking at in terms of a package of investments over time, right? So the first one is the current, which basically looks at the existing land use that's expected from the local general plans and what investments are currently in the capital improvement programs. The B scenario looks at also including residential infill. Maybe you've heard about this, but it's the influx or the increase in accessory dwelling units. These are like, some people call them granny flats. These are smaller units that might be in the back of the home or above. And these also look at new state laws that are called SB9, which allows for properties that you have a single family home, you might split it in 2 and have 2 homes on that lot. And that's now something you can do in California. So it's looking at all this residential infill. Now, both A and B also include investments in alternate modes of transportation, bike and pedestrian, and in transit bus services, right? C and D, which we'll get into a little bit more, have those same investments, but take them a little further to invest more in electromobility, active transportation, and broadband. Broadband meaning the ability to increase development and or investments in Wi-Fi, these sort of things that make transportation a little bit easier. So when we look at this particular idea, we have this financially constrained, we call it tier 1. These are the projects that we know that the cities and the county can afford to pay for with this 25-year window. And again, we're looking at all the anticipated revenue, and it includes transit projects, air quality, operating costs, roadway projects, active transportation, bike ped, as well as aviation. And when you look at the little pie chart on the right, you'll see the various investments in the plan by jurisdiction. Now, overall, what we're looking at is about 10% that we're anticipating will come from grant funding. And that may be some of the funds that are coming from Biden's infrastructure improvement bill, as well as grants that can be applied for through California through SB1. And so that's basically a general idea of what we think we can get out of this period of time. Now, when you look at the scenarios, each one is run through a series of tests to see if we can actually reach what's called the Air Resources Board targets in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as well as other things. So what you'll see in our online website, kingsregionalvision.com, is basically a look at all these different measuring tools and how each one sort of comes up to that, right? So the one you're looking at right now is basically housing units, for example, within 500 feet of a freeway. And there are other things that people look at in terms of what we call equity, or ways that we can make sure that transportation investments are benefiting not just one population, but the entire population in the county. So we have on these scenario developments, these are the things we look at. Now, scenario A, which I talked about very briefly, this follows all of the general plans that are currently in place with our member agencies. That would be Lemoore, Corcoran, Hanford, and Avenal, as well as the county. And so when you look at this, you look at these different things, we call it current trend, and you look at the amount of money that's invested. So right now, 4 million baseline, no build, which means we don't do anything new, and then scenario with looking at reductions of vehicle miles traveled. So you see there's different things that happen with this moving forward. Now, when we look at the greenhouse gas emissions, and one thing that's really important to think about this, the greenhouse gas emissions, that's what comes out of your car. That's carbon that goes into the atmosphere. In this case, all 4 of our alternatives, all of them reach the targets that were set by the Air Resource Board. Our target is 13%. Scenario A projects that we will reach 13.1, which means we're slightly over what the target would be. In scenario A, here's the opportunity here. It's around $1.8 million in terms of revenues, money that's coming in. And then we look at operating cost expenditures. These are all the ways that it's spent. So if you look at this, the operating costs and transit, these are larger pieces, obviously roadway projects. When we talk about roadway projects, we're talking about existing roadways and either repaving or making sure that they are safe to travel. When we look here again at federal conformity, these are all the different things that are met by this scenario. And again, these are called mobile source pollutants. This is what would be kicked out into the air based on this on the federal side. Again, a moment ago, I was talking about the ARB, Air Resource Board, that's California, but this is federal. So scenario A does meet those criteria moving forward. Now, the type of expenditure, when you look at this, this is for scenario A. We see 72% is spent in roadway expenditures. But to be clear, these are not new roadways, but these are maintaining the existing roadways. And the next largest chunk comes from transit, which will get about 25%. And that would be buses, small buses, large buses, any kind of buses that are in the area. You see about 1% for active transportation. That is bike and pedestrian infrastructure improvements that'll happen over that time period. And then the next one goes to aviation. That would be airline travel. And I don't really mean in Kings County, we're not talking about jets. We're more talking about small planes, that sort of thing. And then air quality projects, all unique to Kings County. Now, when you look at the overall formula of what we get in terms of revenue, you'll see here, we're thinking in this scenario about 1.65 $1.65 billion in money coming in, and then you're going to see 163 million and change in grants. And this is, I'm going to say that this is a conservative estimate, but also based on the grant funding that is available and the historic performance that Kings has had in terms of its ability to get grants as time moves on. So this is a conservative estimate, because we really make sure is that when we're looking at this, if someone comes back later and says, you know, financially constrained, is that a realistic number to hit? It is. And that's why we have been conservative in that piece. Now, the roadway projects are listed here. Maintenance is about almost 50%. By maintenance, that is the repaving of roads, making sure that roads are safe to travel, and widening at 4.41%. That's existing roads. So we're not talking about adding capacity on or making new freeways. We're saying these are existing roads that are already out there. And then again, signal installation and infrastructure, that can be everything from, if you've ever waited at a light before, making sure that lights are timed appropriately, because if you're able to go through a roadway and not stop at everyone, that decreases the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are coming out of your car. So these are things that all improve the connectivity, improve your experience on the road, and improve, again, reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. So scenario B is very similar. The difference between the two really is that scenario B takes a look at and projects out the impacts of what will happen in terms of what we call infill, which is existing development, and how it might accommodate more housing. So in this case, we're talking about ADUs. Some of you may have heard these as accessory dwelling units or granny flats, or the ability to build a second unit on your property. And that is becoming quite popular in California, both to address our housing issues and also affordability. The other part of this is looking at SB 9, that's Senate Bill 9, which allows for what we call lot splits in some communities that will allow different areas to have, instead of one house, two houses. And we know that this is coming. And so this scenario is based on existing law, and that will take the existing general plans and tweak them a little bit. And you'll see here that there's different, and we call it vehicle miles traveled. There's different B, you'll see it reduces that because it allows, again, vehicle miles traveled, that's the amount of time you spend in your car going from point A to point B. So scenario B is, again, looking at this greater density in these areas and then making sure that we have more connectivity. So in this particular case, the target was 13%. In this one, we actually go to 13.5 in reduction. That's about 0.4%, well, specifically 0.4% more than we saw in scenario A. Which seems like a small amount, but for the Air Resources Board, that's actually a big amount, because that's a high percentage of what we would see moving forward. And again, this particular scenario also meets all federal air quality conformity and make sure that we're checking all the boxes, so to speak, to meet those needs. Now, in this scenario, the difference, of course, slightly is in some of the expenditures. Again, overall, about the same amount of money in terms of revenue, because it doesn't change, and expenditures change only slightly in terms of operating costs and some of the things that we would look at. Again, we see the largest expenditure by type is in roadway and transit. And again, the roadway expenditures are for maintenance and enhancement of existing roadways as opposed to new. And then you see a little bit of a bump up on active transportation, because again, we want people to be able to commute between their communities. But as we found in Avenal, Corcoran, Lemoore, Hanford, not all communities are set up or shall we say, weather-wise happy with being able to ride and bike to places. So we want to make sure that those are happening in areas where they're well suited for that, which is more likely really in Hanford, Lemoore, and some of the areas there where they're a little more densely populated, so people can take advantage of that. But we're not suggesting that people are going to ride their bikes from Hanford to Corcoran for that matter. But those of you that do, God bless, you're really a lot stronger than I am. Now, on this next slide, we're looking again, same kind of thing. About 10% of the funds will be coming in from competitive grants, which means that they're going after state and federal funds to enhance their existing programs and projects. So that's really not going to change across all of our various pieces. Now, when you visit our project website, again, that's kingsregionalvision.com, or you can also go to the KCAG.gov.com website, or is it .org? I can't remember. I'll get back to you in a moment on that. You'll see these different types of comparisons. And so when you look at current trend, that's the blue, that's all scenario A. And 2035 infill is the nice way of saying more density, that's scenario B. And you can look at different comparisons of how these different scenarios might play out in terms of their ability to meet various criteria or measurements on everything from the amount of time you spend driving to work or to shop, or the household access to various things that are there. Now, both scenario A and scenario B contain investments for both active transportation and electric vehicles or electromobility. And these are basically set up so that we can have options for, thank you for doing that, Terry, options for investments to improve connectivity and again, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We've probably never seen more interest in electromobility than we have in the last several months as gas prices have climbed. Just as an aside, California and the United States still has the lowest gas prices in the world, but if you paid at the pump recently, you know it's painful. So that's one of the things that we're looking at is ways to increase electromobility and also electric mobility access for low income folks. And that means everything from partnerships for shared vehicles in housing development areas and all kinds of other ways that we can connect people with cheaper ways and more efficient ways to travel through the community. So now when we look to the next two scenarios, this is going to be scenarios C and D. These are essentially the same packages with the slight difference that they also include higher investment in broadband. And you may think of broadband and transportation and say like, why are these things together? And the reality is that investment in broadband actually helps us be more efficient with things like traffic signals and the ability to move people through areas. It also helps us with maintaining on-ramps and off-ramps at major facilities. And it also helps in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions because the more folks that are able to work from home, the fewer people that are on the road. So something to consider and something to see in general. Now, in these two scenarios, both of them, as you can see, their greenhouse gas emission reductions are substantially higher than they were in scenarios A and B. But again, this is a hopeful look. A and B we know that these are things that we can actually prove and meet. This is, and my colleague Jim and I were talking about this earlier, I'm calling them aspirational. He says these are challenging. But the idea is these are areas that we'd like to be able to get to. We're just not sure we can at this point, but it's something we did test to see if we could figure out a way to make it through on that. And again, both opportunities in scenarios C and D meet all of the federal requirements as they did in A and B. Terry King, who's with us tonight, is available for any questions or comments that you might have later, and me, Kendall Flint, I'm also available. But what we want to let you know is that our project website is up and is operating, and that's basically, again, kingsregionalvision.com or through the KCAG website, which Terry put on the chat room. This particular presentation will be available online, as well as all of the boards and projections that were created for this project, both in English and in Spanish. I'd like to open up now if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask. If you do, please just raise your hand or type in the chat room and we'll be able to accommodate those. So at this point, I'd like to open it up. And Eduardo, you're our guest tonight, and we're so happy to have you. But if there's any question that you have that I haven't addressed at this point that we can answer for you tonight, we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to type in a question. If not, no problem. You can just share the link for later. I see a question. How many ADUs does Kings County currently have? We all appreciate that you are considering broadband as a green strategy. In terms of the number of ADUs, Jim, is that something that you know based on the information that was used to create scenarios C and D?
In terms of, well, we chatted with each of the local agencies, and there has been an uptick in ADU activity. They have the exact numbers by jurisdiction that we can get for you if you're interested.
Dora, if you type your email address in the chat room, we'll be able to email that information to you. It might take us a little bit, but we could certainly get that for you.
Yeah, all the agencies are tracking it, so they know exactly how many permits have come in for ADUs. I will say that as part of our future projection of ADU activity, we're estimating around 1,600 ADUs over the life of the plan. And that's not, that's a fairly reasonable pace, maybe slightly higher than over the last few years, but we expect this to pick up. And I know a number of jurisdictions have actually made the effort to update their zoning codes so that, it's more congruent with state flexibility with respect to ADU development and lot splits. So it's something that the county is opening up to all its jurisdictions. And so it's an activity we definitely wanted to try to reflect as part of one of our land use scenarios.
And I think, Jim, just so we can have it on the record for those that watch this later, I know there were some questions as we started on this process about whether or not Kings was going to be able to meet the targets that were set by ARB, Air Resources Board, because there were some challenges. But I just wanted hoping that you could reiterate again that all four do meet those targets. And can you talk about the study that was done to determine that that was going to happen?
Right. So correct. All four scenarios do meet the state greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. As you saw in Kendall's presentation, scenarios A and B do make it. C and D make it by a bit more, but that bit more comes at a greater investment and challenge in terms of what we expect in terms of revenue from the county and the assistance from the state with respect, especially with respect to broadband expansion and then electromobility. It's not that A and B don't invest in those things, but not to the extent as C and D. But also, it's very important to note that all four scenarios meet the federal air quality conformity requirements. Those are the health-based pollutants, such as ozone and particulate matter. Both those pollutants are in federal non-attainment status currently in Kings County. So those are very important. And so, yeah, all four scenarios do meet the state and federal air quality requirements. So they're very eligible to be reviewed and selected. One will be selected as a preferred alternative, and that will occur in August. And maybe Terry can talk more about that in terms of what's coming next. But right now, we're just seeking input on which scenario people of Kings County would prefer to see.
And on that note, I'd like to point out that on the website, and when we get this workshop and the other materials posted up there, you'll see some opportunities to answer questions about which scenario you prefer. And also, we're in a review period. So we've got about, I think now, supposed on June 7th, if my math is correct, we still have about 52 days left on the, 42 days left on the review cycle in order to take in comment before it goes for the board. Terry, jump right in there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jim, for talking about the different levels of emission reductions from the different scenarios. I'm wondering, with the difference between the 13.1 and then going up to, what was it, 17% or so, is there an opportunity to kind of relook at some of the investments to see if you can get one that is kind of an intermediate in between those two variables?
Yeah, I think really the question is, how much are we willing to, and I think Kendall was alluding to this, there is a technical analysis that goes into estimating the reductions in vehicle miles of travel, which then results in emission reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. And then there are things like electromobility that have a direct effect on greenhouse gas emission reduction straight from the tailpipe. So a lot of this, we have to analyze and we have to pick and choose things that we feel we can defend, because the state will review the sustainable community strategy portion of this plan. and they will question the technical veracity of our analysis. So everything has to be well defended and well documented. We can probably, in terms of a hybrid, if you will, I think that's what you're alluding to, Terry, we can take some things off the table and just choose not to try to estimate a benefit in terms of BMT or air quality reduction. But in terms of the investments and the directions that the county is going, those things should be full throttle. Like, these are good things to do. The county is actually making great progress. I'm very impressed, and I told this to Terry, that Kings County is ahead of the game in California for having an electromobility plan for the county. And it's really nice to see that State Route 198 was selected by Caltrans as a broadband corridor for that first mile, last mile connection to communities that currently do not have high-speed broadband. And you may be asking why broadband is kind of being considered as part of a transportation plan, is that if you can provide high quality broadband service to folks, there may be more activity for telecommuting, telehealth, teleshopping, teleeducation, all these things that could reduce people from having to get in their cars and drive around, which results obviously in emission reductions and better air quality and meeting our goals. So that's why that is so important. And I think Kings County is doing a lot of really great things. It's just a matter of how much we want to try to take credit for with respect to these emission reduction requirements that the State Air Resources Board has brought forth that we have to meet. So
thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Well done. Well, so I see we may have another question. Let me just see what that says here. What rideshare programs are currently available in Kings County? Terry, do you want to take that one?
We have a few rideshare programs. There are 2 van pool programs that operate within Kings County. You've probably seen the Cal vans moving around throughout the state, basically. There is both what we just call a regular van pool program for ordinary citizens going to their jobs at job centers, such as around here, most of them are going to the prisons in either Avenal or Corcoran or Lemoore Naval Air Station. And then new now is the Kings Area Regional Transit, or CART system, is now operating a CART van pool program. And then I do believe there are various old style rideshare programs online, maybe through Fresno, where you can sign up for individual carpool type efforts there. I believe those are still available. So those are some of the rideshare programs out there. There's also some of the larger employers may have guaranteed ride home programs that facilitate that, such as you are carpooling, but once you get to work, your person who drove you has an emergency and they need to leave early. And so you need to find a ride home. Some agencies have different options available to you, such as the County of Kings. They will potentially call CalVans or CART system or what other option they might have available for you. So other employers might have that as well. I hope that answered your question there.
Thanks, Terry. And I'm checking Eduardo. Oh, this is great information. Hey, thank you so much. Eduardo says, I'm just reading this for those that might be watching later. This is great information. Thank you for the invite. My department manages the San Joaquin Valley Regional Broadband Consortium. Oh, we need to get together, Eduardo, and provide support to the San Joaquin Valley Housing Collaborative. We're interested to partner and see how we can help reduce the carbon emissions in Kings County, utilizing broadband and other methods. Thank you. And we're very grateful to have you with us tonight. So thank you so much for that. We will be posting this presentation as well as our other materials online, and the background materials are already available That means the existing draft regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, and the accompanying environmental document that addresses the California Environmental Quality Act. So if there are no other questions, Terry, did you want to have any closing comments before I close this off tonight?
Yes, I do, Kendall. Again, as a reminder, the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy has been posted on the KCAG website. Again, that's www.kingscog.org, and that it is available for public review and comment period. The comment period began on July 7th and ends on August 30th. And then we also have public hearings on these two documents. They are scheduled for August 10th and August 24th before the KCAG Transportation Policy Committee. These meetings will be held at the Hanford City Council chambers beginning at 3 o'clock on those dates. I would also like to mention, in association with these two documents that we've talked about tonight, there are additional documents out there you may be interested in that are out for public review and comment that are associated with this. One is, of course, the draft environmental impact report for the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategies. And that was released on July 15th. And the comment period ends on August 29th. And then the two other documents that were released on July 15th and open for a 30-day review and comment period are the draft Federal Transportation Improvement Program. And that is basically a list of federally funded projects that in order for them to proceed and the projects to move forward, they need to be included in this document. That is available, and the comment period ends on August 15 for that. And then also we have the draft air quality conformity analysis. Jim talked about it meets air quality conformity. There is the draft analysis for that. So all of these documents, again, are posted on our website and available for review and comment for their associated periods. And again, we thank you for your time and interest in all of these documents and look forward to having you participate in our efforts in the future.
Hey, thank you, Terry, and thank you, Jim, and thank you, Ilse, for being here tonight. And Eduardo, we appreciate your appearance as well. Again, this will be posted on the KCAG website as well as the kingsregionalvision.com website. It will remain live through the duration of the process. And we really do appreciate everyone who takes a moment to share with us your ideas and your reaction to the various scenarios. Again, our contact information is up on the screen. I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight, and I hope you have a safe and happy rest of your evening. And again, thank you all for attending. And with that, I'm going to close this workshop. If there's no other comments, we will let that go. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you all, and good night.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.